he says that the alarm was delayed 6 minutes deliberately in order to help the assassin escape.
The alarm was delayed, the police alarm was delayed. How could that happen? Who was responsible for that?
My father didn't believe that these bullets were the right one. They were planted there afterwards just to show that the weapon have been a Magnum, Smith & Wesson Magnum.
Would you say that we have to deal with an international deep state?
That's why we can understand also that so powerful circles and are responsible for it.
Gegen den Strom. Zur Person. Hallo bei Gegen den Strom. Wir zeigen Ihnen Positionen.
Hello and welcome to Against the Current. We bring you positions and perspectives that the propaganda media keep quiet about. Today, we're talking about blood in the snow, about a murder on an icy winter night in downtown Stockholm. On February 28, 1986, Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme was shot dead on the street. The crime remains unsolved to this day. Today I'm speaking with a man whose father was the first police officer at the scene. He wrote an article titled, 40 Years Since the Murder of Olof Palme, 40 Years of Cover-Up. He is an economist and translator, and together with others, he launched an appeal to establish a truth commission to finally help bring the truth to light.
Endlich der Wahrheit ans Tageslicht zu verhelfen. Welcome, Henry Söderström. It's a great privilege to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
What did your father tell you about this winter night when Olof Palme was killed?
Yeah, I was also in Stockholm that night, working at a post office. And when I got there in the morning, people were very silent, and the music was on the radio, and nobody was saying anything. And I asked, what has happened to something? Don't you know that Olof Palme has been killed? And then I was stunned, of course. And then I went back to the apartment of my brothers, and I heard that my father had been there at the crime scene, responsible for the initial investigations there as a highest ranking police officer during this fateful night in Stockholm. And he discovered quite quickly that there was something mysterious about this, that they were hiding the right timing when he arrived to the crime scene. They were stopped by a man coming up 500 meters from the crime scene, saying that somebody has been killed, that has been shooting not far away. And then he wrote the time, looked at his watch and wrote the time, 23:28. And then he heard, and his driver also was driving there quickly, that there was a alarm on the police radio to all the Stockholm inner districts that a man has been shot there. And then they arrived first to the crime scene, and after some 2 minutes, he got his first contact with the communication central, or alarm central, what you can call it. And also his driver looked at the watch. So that's very important to understand my father's role in this, because he says that the alarm was delayed 6 minutes deliberately in order to help the assassin escape there. So it's part of this so-called police track that he believes in. So when we got there, a man was lying on the ground there, bleeding, and people were trying to rescue his life and so on. But he looked at the man with wide open eyes, and he understood that he was dead, and that it was fruitless to give him this kind of measures to save his life. He was dead. And then 3 times he tried to contact a woman there on the crime scene. She was really upset, more or less hysterical, and it took him 3 times to get to know what has happened and who the man was there. And are you insane? Don't you see? Well, who am I? And then my husband is lying there, Olof. And then he recognized the prime minister on his significant nose there. So, and after that, he said his historical sentence that is it known who the crime victim is? He is identical with the prime minister. So my father was not in a shock when he said these words. And the first contact were 4 minutes earlier, and then it's important because he said that that's kind of proof that he was right about the time. And when he got together with his driver to the police station there at Östermalm, they were writing a report in the night what had happened, and the driver, police constable, he also had the same conviction about the time when they heard alarm and then arrived to the crime scene. So they more or less agreed independently of each other. And then the next day he went to the police station where he worked and got a computer list from the system, and it confirmed that he was right. The first contact with this command and communications central was at 23:31, and then 23:35 was the first message, the one he had identified the victim. But since there was a little discrepancy on some about the time there, then he contacted the communication alarm central again, and then they said that the police alarm was 23:23, just 2 minutes after the murder. So that's a 6 minutes discrepancy. So, and he has been convinced all through his life that he was right, and this conviction has helped him to go on in this process to prove that he was right. And at the same time, he understood that it's a cover-up. So these 6 minutes point into a police track that 2 police units, police vans, they got a directed alarm at that time, early after the assassination. But they didn't go directly to the crime scene. They were waiting south and north of this big street, Sveavägen. And then by coincidence, he came first, so he wasn't alerted about this in this directed alarm. And he has got this information that there was a directed alarm only to these 2 units, and maybe another police commissioner should be responsible for the initial activities on the crime scene. So that's part of the police track, that they delayed alarm and in the way helped the killer to escape there without being caught by ordinary police.
The alarm was delayed. The police alarm was delayed. How could that happen? Who was responsible for that?
Yeah, one of the police vans, a unit from another police district, Södermalm, they left their own district in order to repark one of the members of the crew, his car, around not far from the crime scene. So at the same time the shooting was done, they were up and in a parallel street at exactly the same time, and one of the members, ordinary members of this unit, he was in this alarm central working, and he was the one who took the alarm from the taxi central. So it was a taxi driver that saw it first, and he alerted his his taxi central in Järfälla about it. But this operator at the command center, he made 4 mistakes that he broke the line, and he didn't call the ambulance also, and he didn't start the activities they should do about catching up the killer and so on. So he did more or less nothing.
Just by chance?
Just by chance. And in an order, he was an ordinary crew member of this police unit there that was on the not far from the crime scene. And they came 10 seconds after my father's arrival there. And there was one witness also that ran after the murder, the alleged murder. We are not sure if he ran up the stairs, the 89 stairs to another parallel street, or we can speculate that maybe he ran to the left instead and escaped in this Scandia house. That's a theory also, that it could have been another person running up the stairs there after the shootings there. And this witness, he saw another police car, not his van, an ordinary. That was the commissioner, police commissioner colleague who was next to my father's rank on duty in the night. And they said that they heard the alarm on the radio that my father was on there, and they tried to block the escape route, but they didn't know which way the killer had taken. And they didn't stop the man who was coming after the murderer there. So when my father heard about that, and they didn't inform my father on the crime scene about this very important witness also, and they didn't take him going around and looking for the suspect. So that they hid this very important witness, and they didn't stop him. It was himself, the witness, that stopped the car and asked if they're chasing the murderer and so on. And they said yes. And so on. But when my father heard that on the radio, because Lars Borgnäs, an investigative Swedish journalist, he had said, he had contacted this witness who was running after the assassin. And that was at the time before my father came there. So he was very suspicious about it, that they were lying about things there. So his conspiracy theory is about the police involvement in this assassination, that they didn't catch the killer, and it was quite the reverse. They helped the murderer to escape there without being caught by ordinary policemen.
Could I say that the details don't compare to each other?
Yeah, that's right. And it was also interesting for journalists and others about this timing, the discrepancy. So they got they ordered a cassette, a tape, yeah, from the police investigation there. And it was a mono tape with this clock. You can call a number and you get the right time. And this channel of this Miss Clock or something is called, it was a separate channel on this recording. So they gave just a tape there with all the traffic. But it was later discovered that some very important calls had been cut out from there, so they weren't there. But the main thing that was revealed, it was that the tape, the channel of the fröken, the Miss Clock, the automatic clock that you can hear, and one technician there, he ordered this. He ordered this tape. He also checked which one was used in Sweden during the night. So he discovered that there were two machines, machine A and B. And then he bought very sophisticated equipment to analyze this and get these sound curves and amplitude diagrams and so on, which show that the misclock, I don't know the right term there, but that was from the machine that wasn't used during the night when Palme was killed. So by chance they had just taken another channel, another machine, recording from another machine, and put together this tape. So that was a scandal when it was discovered in 1988, 2 years after. And where was the original tape from the alarm central? It has been burnt, and it has disappeared, and it has been erased. But then after this scandal was coming up more on a press conference, so then they found this original tape, and it was analyzed also.
In this very night of February 28, 1986, Olof Palme and his daughter-in-law and his son agreed to go to the movies after 7 o'clock to visit a movie show at Grand Theater on Sveavägen at 9 o'clock.
Mm.
I can remember that there were 80 witnesses who declared that there were on Olof Palme's way walkie-talkie men. There were no mobile phones those days, but many men had in this night walkie-talkies.
Mm.
Was this accurately investigated?
No, not at all. That was also discovered by Lars Borgnäs, who was contacted by people who had cited walkie-talkie men just in the vicinity of the crime scene, and also in the old town where the Palmes were living, and that was a kind of surveillance operation going on with a lot of sightings of walkie-talkie men. But the police, they dismissed everything. They said that they had found other explanations that couldn't be proved. Just were pleased with that they had some other explanations, and that also that the people had seen these walkie-talkie men, they were not reliable. They were mistaken and so on. So, but 80 witness testimonies were dismissed because this is not compatible with the theory of a lone assassin, which they were working with.
That means in this night, Olof Palme was completely under surveillance.
Yeah, that's right. But that was not the official version, so they couldn't explain these sightings in another way that they had nothing to do with the Palme assassination.
And what about the bodyguards?
Yeah, that's also true, that Palme didn't have any bodyguards, in spite of the fact that he had been threatened and so on. The person, the police superintendent responsible for the bodyguards, he had gone to mass media and said that the PKK, the Kurdish Communist Party, was threatening Olof Palme. So he had that information in the autumn of 1985 planted in mass media, and he was the one responsible for the bodyguards who were not working this very night.
The head of the government without bodyguards, this is for German average completely unusual.
Yeah, and nowadays also in Sweden. Well,
and let's have an eye on the bullets. The snow was taken away and completely checked. No bullets were found.
Yeah,
but in the days later, 2 bullets were found. What is that?
Yeah, that's one of the very strange things there. The police technicians, they were at the crime scene investigating the area there very thoroughly, with several hours there, and cleaning every particle there, more or less. And they didn't find any bullets there. And the first bullet was found also by a private person, but not in this area, which was in a cordon around the murder place. It was the one which was supposed to have wounded Lisbeth Palme, scratched her back a little bit. It was found 6-7 hours after, and by a private person. But the astonishing thing is that the Palme bullet, which was supposed to kill the prime minister, was found 37 hours after the shooting there at Sveavägen, and just 7 meters from the spot where Palme fell down to the ground, and that it was lying next to a big pillar, not far from the entrance to the underground station. And the policemen, the technicians, they said that if the bullet had been there, would have found it, of course. So they both of the ones.
And it was a bullet of a Smith & Wesson 357, which is a heavy caliber, and a bullet so clear, it sounds strange.
It's Winchester Magnum ammunition. So they had 2 bullets there, and they were not deformed in any way. So a specialist from Smith & Wesson agency in Sweden, he said that if they would have been found, if they were real, that they should have been very deformed if they were found so close to the crime scene. So, and he excluded that it could be the right bullets. And also a minor scandal, I think. It was because they were cleaned also. So they couldn't, before they were sent away to further examinations to BK in Germany and the FBI. So they had to clean them. So they showed no trace of textures or blood or something. So we can I can say that I can't, and my father didn't believe that these bullets were the right one. They were planted there afterwards just to show that the weapon should have been a Magnum, Smith & Wesson Magnum. And the head of the technician, the police technicians, Vincent Lange, he also said in an interview in 1988 that the bullets they're fake. They're not the real ones. They were put there to make the investigation on the wrong track, which I think is true. But then when Christer Pettersson, a drug addict and an alcoholic,
he was named as murder.
Yeah. He was arrested and caught and brought into trial and convicted in the first instance also. But at that time, the theory about planted bullets wasn't compatible with Christer Pettersson's actions and whereabouts on the murder night.
So all these details are pointing in one direction, that a huge group of men must be behind the assassination. But the very first chief investigator, Hans Holmér, was completely focused on a lone nut, on a lone perpetrator, and he brought Christer Pettersson under suspicion.
No, not Christer Pettersson. It was the first one, the 33-year-old right extremist, more or less, Victor Gunnarsson, who was arrested
for some weeks.
During the funeral, when all the statesmen were attending the state funeral.
And then he showed up with the story that a drug addict...
No, it was never from Hans Holmér from the beginning. It was later, after the when Hans Holmér was fired from the investigation. He had, from the very beginning, the confidence of the politicians in the Social Democratic Party, including Ingvar Carlsson, the new prime minister. Also, and he had no experience of these investigations of crimes. He was a bureaucrat, a lawyer, a lawman, or having studied law and so on. So he was a police chief. But he took command of this investigation from the very beginning. And from the first was a 33-year-old. He had to go through a very tedious process of lineups with the confrontation of witnesses. So it was very hard for. Well, yeah, couldn't have been easy just to go through this. But anyway, what was scandalous was that he had an alibi that was kept away from the prosecutor. So the prosecutor was very critical to Holmér's investigation. Wow. For instance, Holmér hadn't allowed contact with the forensic experts, no contact at all. They were not on the reconstruction, and they didn't make any investigation of angles, shooting angles on facades, and not Lisbeth Palme's alleged wound also.
Why was Hans Holmér, as first chief investigator, so strongly focused on the lone nut theory?
More or less from the beginning, he had the impression, which he has written about in a book. Olof Palme has been shot, it's called in Swedish. And then he said that he was speculating about the Kurds being involved, PKK Kurds from the Communist Party, that they should have had a motive because they were arrested in the municipalities. They couldn't, because they were involved in some killings of defectors of this party, but they have never killed statesmen and so on. And they also said that Palme and the Social Democratic government had denied Abdullah Öcalan to have a permit to stay in Sweden. So it was denied. So that should have been a motive. But the Kurds, they liked Olof Palme, so it was not very heavy motives. But it all ended in a big attack against 26 Kurdish people who were arrested, and then they were released after a press conference. And Holmér didn't get so well with the other prosecutor. The first one who criticized, he was replaced by another one who also was very critical to Holmér. So having had the support from the government and so on, so this was not workable any longer. So we had to go. And then after Holmér, then we had Hans Ölvebro, who became the chief investigator. And he was said to have been a real cop, doing with the experience from murder investigations and so on. So it's said that the investigation was ruined by Holmér, so he was a scapegoat, more or less. And then after that, it was a real investigation that came up with this lone assassin, Christer Pettersson, who had been pointed out on a lineup by Lisbeth Palme also. So that was the main evidence pointing to him, that he was identified by Lisbeth Palme, who, by the way, had pointed out other people earlier, and she didn't say anything about the face of the murderer. And at the hospital, she said that there were two suspects that she had recognized from Old Town also. So.
In your article, 40 Years of Cover-Up, you are opposing this lone nut theory.
Yes.
And you are referring to former CIA officer Gene Tatum, who provided some evidence of this case. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that was in 1997. He made an interview on radio, and then he said that it was a special group, operation subgroups that had been created, reporting to the National Security Agency and to the Vice President, George Herbert Walker Bush also.
Mm-hmm.
So he said that the reason was that Palme had intervened against the illegal arms trade that were going on during the 80s.
The situation was that the United States installed a Iran-Contra complex. They wanted to get hostages freed by the Iranians, and they promised to deliver weapons, and they wanted to take the money from this weapons shipping to support the anti-Sandinist Contras in Nicaragua.
Yeah,
that was
right.
The background. And this is a story of during the Reagan era, and the vice president was George W. Bush.
Yeah. And in order to have everything more efficient and smoothly working, that then they didn't have to get the approval from the Congress or something. So they had these special entities that were reporting directly to George Bush and his surroundings, more or less. And we had Oliver North there also involved in this smuggling of arms to Iran and with money to the Contras to buy weapons and so on. So this was this Iran-Contra scandal that erupted later in 1986. It was not a scandal at that time when Palme was this Gene Tatum said that Palme intervened in order to stop this smuggling route, which the arms manufacturer Bofors in Sweden used. So they could make use of their channels in order to smuggle ship arms to Iran.
And the Americans organized that weapons shipping, that weapons smuggling via third countries to make this invisible by US Congress. So it was a worldwide network of weapons shipping, weapons delivering, and in the heart of that stood Colonel Oliver North.
Yeah, that's right. And
so he wrote a diary.
Yeah, he wrote a diary. Yes, I can quote him there. On the 11th of March, just some days after the Palme assassination, he wrote in a diary that has been accessible in the National Security Archive in Washington, that everything now was ready for shipment. And Palme is said to have intervened and stopped the shipment of some Robot 70 anti-aircraft missiles, robots and so on. So, and then he was cooperating with an arms dealer manager, Gorbin,
an Iranian.
Yeah, and the Israel Prime Minister's Shimon Peres envoy also. So yeah, so Amarim Nir. That's the one in this quotation.
This was an Israeli Secret Service agent.
He was an intermediary in this weapon deals. And then the quotation here. Call from Nir. Gorbin wants Nir to bring items with him to Sweden. After February, all things are possible. So after February, that was when the Palme assassination happened. And it's also a fact that he stopped also, it intervened when it comes to explosive smuggling via an arms dealer, Karl-Erik Schmitz also. So the customs officer, they had they examined they made what do you call it, scrutiny of his apartment and warehouse and so on, and they found a lot of things there. So and he said to have been a CIA collaborator.
And Karl-Erik Schmitz lived in Malmö and later on in Switzerland.
Mm. Yeah, and he hasn't said anything to journalists who were interested in this. So this is something that can have a bearing on the Palme assassination, that he was an obstacle, and also as a mediator in the war between Iran and Iraq. Also, he knew a lot, and the day of his death in Sveavägen, Stockholm, he was visited by the Iraqian ambassador also. And he said that Palme was upset after this meeting. So they know, of course, I think, what was going on, and that USA was using Swedish channels to smuggle weapons to Iran.
At the first glimpse, this sounds like conspiracy theory, but it is completely and detailed, accurately documented in the files of the U.S. Congress on the Iran-Contra affair. And the advantage of the Israeli side was to bring Iraq and Iran against each other and to bring them into a long military conflict.
And it was a long, bloody military conflict, 9 years, I think.
So, and Olof Palme stopped this weapons business. And the Swedish military company Bofors was also involved. In which way?
Yeah, they were manufacturing of explosives and these howitzers and everything. So they were making money also on this illegal arms trade to countries in war, which was not allowed according to Swedish law. Of course, you shouldn't export any weapons to countries that are in war with each other. So it got to other countries, Singapore, for instance, and Malaysia, and they got these certificates of end use. So that was the things. These certificates, the certificates were used in this trade also. So they could be used in the war.
Yeah. This is a strange story, but it's completely correct. They used third countries and they used certificates for delivering the weapons for other countries. And then from the other countries, the weapons went on into conflict zones. And Olof Palme stopped that. It was a profitable business. And this is a motive for a motive.
A real financial motive. And well, we could have an ideological motive also here, because Palme wasn't so popular within the U.S. administration since the 60s, when he had been demonstrating against the Vietnam War, and he was supporting liberation movements in Africa and in Latin America, and good contacts with Fidel Castro and Manuel Ortega in Nicaragua, for instance. So, and it was very important for some circles of individuals who didn't like Olof Palme that he should be removed. He was a traitor also, because he was going to the Soviet Union to meet with Gorbachev also. So it said that there's a track which is called the traitor track, that they consider him a traitor to the nation. So he was too friendly with the Soviet Union and so on.
Palme intended to meet Mikhail Gorbachev in Moscow in spring 1986. And he wanted to discuss a neutral Scandinavia and a nuclear-free zone in Central Europe. And this could have been a danger to NATO.
Yeah. NATO saw this as a threat to the northern flank, and these ideas he had working with in the Palme Commission also for peace and rearmament and mutual understanding or something, with members from Soviet Union and other countries also in Europe. So with what I meant that Denmark and Norway should have left NATO also. So this was not at all popular within NATO. And we have also seen that there is a trail leading to NATO here. Also, it's called Operation 3. So it's said that there should have been a meeting with NATO officials and people belonging to some NATO groups coordinating this stay behinds in Europe and so on. So they should have had
operations planning staff.
Yes, that's so,
and a light clandestine committee.
Yeah, you know more about that, maybe. So
I saw the documents, and it's accurately documented in NATO documents. And the official voices say these documents are a falsification, but I think these documents are true. What do you think?
Yeah, it looks like the truth. There had been this classified as cosmic top secret, and they were detailed. They were dated from the 7th of January 1986. So, and the Swedish Prime Minister was mentioned in these documents, and I think the wording was more or less that he was a problem to be removed, and that the Swedish participants or agents should perform this, solve this by themselves also.
And partly these documents were provided by a mysterious CIA officer with the name Oswald de Winter.
Yeah. Which
role played Oswald de Winter?
He is considered to be information swindler or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if he was right there about these things. And he had contact with the journalist from BBC, Alan Frankovich, also, who is said to know who the assassin was and was going to meet him in the United States. So
Alan Frankovich was a investigative reporter who planned to make a documentary on the Palme assassination. What was his personal history? Do you know more about him?
I know that he had investigated Stay Behind and made a long BBC documentary about it. And
the secret NATO army.
Yeah, and he had much information about this. And he found out that it was a professional assassin who had been employed by the Iranian security service and trained by the CIA. And that was the man who he was going to meet, but that he suddenly died from a heart attack entering the customs in Houston,
Texas.
Yeah, yes. 1997, yeah.
And this is something Alan Frankovich wanted to discuss with my friend, Professor Robert Harkavi. They discussed exactly that point. And Robert told me this was not a natural death in Houston, Texas.
No.
Something was wrong in this situation. More about this point, the possible involvement of NATO. What did you find out?
No, it found out more than we have said about the special operation planning group, or that they had a clandestine meeting in Wiltshire, where we had Swedish participants and so on. And that this document was established. Everything was planned more or less during this meeting.
During a meeting in Wiltshire, the Palme assassination was planned according to the document, and a Swedish representative attended this meeting, but Sweden was not a member of NATO. How that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we had 2 Swedish participants. One was the arms deals inspector called Fredrik Algernon, who is supposed to have jumped in front of a subway train in Stockholm and killed himself by suicide. And he was investigating, or should we make testimonies about the Bofors scandal, because there was a lot of things with the Indian deal that they had been paying big bribes and so on to intermediaries in the Indian deal when they sold, had an enormous profitable deal carried out thanks to Palme, also with good contacts with Rajiv Gandhi. It was 8 billion Swedish kronor. So Palme in this case saved Bofors also, and the general director of Bofors, he wrote also in a diary that Palme's involvement, will this be known to the public, then the Swedish government will fall. So there are some shady businesses with this Indian deal also. And Algernon, he is supposed to have killed himself. Another one was a high security service employee, one of the main figures in the Swedish security police there also.
And in some way, at this point, an Italian lodge comes into play.
Yes.
How that?
That's interesting. Only 3 days before the assassination, then a telegram was sent from Italy, from the Grand Lodge, or P2, that was not known also to the public. Everything concerning Stay Behind and this P2 revelations and so on, they were kept in secret. And it was not until 1990 that it was the scandal was a fact, that many high Italian politicians and militaries had been involved in this Freemason lodge. That was with Licio Gelli, that was the main figure, Licio Gelli. And he is supposed to have sent a telegram to a collaborator in the Reagan administration, and with this wording: "Tell our friend that the Swedish tree will be felled." And there's not an alternative quotation, that to tell our friend Bush that the Swedish tree will be felled. And that was only 3 days before the assassination. And Licio Gelli was a close acquaintance to Reagan and Bush also. He was at their inauguration also in 1981. So, and this is a telegram that should have been sent only 3 days. And the Swedish tree, we have it again. That palm, it's a tree also, so that could have been used as a code name for this operation.
Would you say that we have to deal with an international deep state?
Yeah, it seems that this is very crucial, just this very political assassination. Yeah. And that's why we can understand also that so powerful circles and are responsible for it and involved in it. So it should be a big scandal that if it was reveal the truth about it. So everything is in the nation's interest. Just when it has come to contacts with with superpowers and so on. So Sweden couldn't just blame and accuse the United States, for instance, to being behind this Palme assassination is impossible. And Swedish police, they have no experience, they don't know how to do it, and then it was not promoted by the government and the authorities at all, just to go more deeply into these international trails, of which you have the South African also. Gene Tatum, the CIA defect agent, he had just said that it was a South African that was the killer. So we have the South African track also that was exploded in 1996 when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Africa had the interrogations with policemen and militaries responsible for atrocities during the apartheid era.
And they witnessed that the South African Secret Service was involved, and they witnessed as well some names.
Yes, there was Eugene de Kock. He just in passing was saying that comparing some kind of operation that resembles the one that Craig Williamson did in Sweden when Palme was killed. So he named Craig Williamson as the one responsible, and it was of course a very interesting worldwide news. And Craig Williamson was he had been working in the military service, just carrying out the assassinations on apartheid, on people that were anti-apartheid and so on. So, and the week before the murder of Palme, then there was a big conference in Stockholm, an anti-apartment parliament, it was called, a conference where Palme was standing up and condemning this system as very hard condemnations directed to the apartment, the apartheid system and the government of South Africa. So it was not popular, of course, within South Africa.
And we have witnesses who said Craig Williamson, the South African Secret Service officer, was on the ground in Stockholm.
Yeah, it has come from various sources that he was in Stockholm during this conference, and he might have stayed also.
But he personally denied that.
Yeah. And other South African agents had pointed that it was Craig Williamson that organized the crime, and the perpetrators have been pointed out also. As Anthony White is one, is a Rhodesian elite soldier also, who is said also to have been in Stockholm. So there are a lot of things pointing in the direction that the South African hit team was operating in Stockholm during this night, when there was also a big exercise with military and policemen. So that preventing a coup d'etat. So they had an exercise some days before, some days before the assassination, and with paratroopers from a military base in southern Sweden. They went to Stockholm and were in Stockholm during the night. And that can explain all the witnesses that have cited people with walkie-talkies and so on. That could be part of this big exercise. That was also not known to the public. My father didn't know anything about this. He only understood that it was a conspiracy with police and militaries, and this stay behind also was more or less suspected for.
Let me repeat. They maneuvered to prevent a coup d'etat for making a coup d'etat.
Yeah. So that might have been part of the exercise, that to eliminate important persons that shouldn't be in the hands of the Soviet invasion. That was preventing invasion from the Soviet Union. That was the thing. So the stay behind should be working behind enemy lines also, and this exercise should have been like preventing an assassination of an information carrier, or which we can call Palme, the prime minister. So maybe they were involved in this exercise during the night, or
they were embedded in an exercise to plan and to organize a political assassination.
And I just think that we had a small commando group that they made it for real. They used this as a background, and also they knew about the exercise and so on. But they took the chance to do it in reality. So that was what happened, and maybe that's why people that have been spotted with walkie-talkies were quite open. They were not hiding so much, and so on. But this was an operation that was very clandestine and not known to anybody, more or less. But it has come up some years, 4 or 5 years ago, during the investigation that was carried out by the last prosecutor, Christer Petersson. And they thought also that this South African trail was interesting. So, and then they were also in South Africa working with that, and it's supposed that they had a meeting with the South African military security services and the police from Sweden. They had a meeting in 2020 in South Africa, but we have heard that they agreed more or less that this shouldn't come out. They shouldn't go any further with this. And it's also interesting to say that if the South African group was responsible, well, behind this, they didn't do it, these kind of international operations without the clearance from MI6 and CIA. So I think they had a green light from there to carry out this.
And a foreign hit team cannot operate without support on the ground right here in Sweden. Who were the supporters? Yeah,
then we're back where we started with the police track and my father's suspicions that they delayed the alarm and the police vans. They covered up the escape routes of the killer. And these things were the times that my father reported. It is interesting here because it shows that there had been a delay, that the operator there delayed the alarm deliberately. But when this original tape was supposed to have been examined by the forensic center in Linköping, everything was all right, they said. So the ambulance went, that's the official version, that the ambulance with the dead body and Palme's wife went to the hospital at 23:28, and that contradicts my father's version that he said that the taxi the ambulances went away 23:35, 7 minutes later. So, but the official version is that there is nothing in his suspicions.
So we can find contradictions in the official version.
Yeah, and I can also say that the chief investigator that, like a coup, took control over the investigation, Hans Holmér, and the one who really should have led the Stockholm police, he wasn't contacted at all, and he read about it in the newspaper in the morning. So, and he was couldn't do his job. There was Hans Holmér who took over, and there was also suspicions that starting from information from Hans Holmér's driver, that he was driving Hans Holmér in Stockholm. So it was a big lie that he should have stayed in the hotel in Dalarna, preparing for running the cross-country ski race, Vasaloppet. And no one has seen him at the hotel. And the driver has said that he was driving around, and that they passed the crime scene 7 minutes after the murder without stopping there.
So that means Swedish police officers were in some way involved in the whole thing.
Yeah, it could be the case, yeah. So that was what my father thought, and he had got confirmations from the driver that he drove Holmér in Stockholm, that he wasn't in Borlänge at that occasion.
Could you provide
and
names?
He also sent he accused him also that he was lying. So that everything, all my father's contributions to this case were dismissed. So
I see, concerning the Swedish police, 2 tracks. Police officers had close contacts to South Africa, to the apartheid state.
Yes, that's right.
And the second point is there were right extremists under the police officers.
Yeah, that's
for example, the so-called baseball gang. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that was a group of policemen that was created by Hans Holmér also, and they were quite brutal when they were cleaning up among the criminals in Stockholm, and they were also right extremists, and these people can be spotted during the night of the assassination also, with walkie-talkies and in the police vans, and they were also members of a shooting club, the Stockholm Defense Shooting Club. So we had many names also that is popping up in this circumstance when it comes to the Palme assassination. And they had been in South Africa also in the autumn of 1985, training with police and militaries in South Africa, and had very good relations with the police there, and with the International Police Association. It was through this association everything was organized. And it is said that Craig Williamson, the super spy in South African, he was he was living at a hotel, at an apartment belonging to the International Police Association during the night. So the many things pointing to the same network of right extreme policemen and militaries, and they saw Olof Palme as a threat. But I don't think that they carried out this on their own initiative, just on order from above. That
so
they
we
should
have
take part of this.
We have a complete picture.
Yes, we have a conspiracy theory.
It is now we have evidence. That's the point. We have a lot of evidence. We have facts that there was an international hit team with support in Sweden.
From locals, yeah.
Flown in, and as a orchestrator, MI6 and CIA and NATO in the background. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, and this top secret organization that wasn't famous, the infamous at that time, stay behind also. So part of this NATO secret armies also. And we have this Hans Holmér who surely I think that's my conviction. He knew about these plans and everything, and he saw what happens, and he discovered that with the support of the government that this is too big. This shouldn't be revealed to the public. We can't go on with this. The assassination of Prime Minister should be solved in another way, and that's why he chose a lone assassin from the beginning, and then the PKK, the Kurdish Communist Party, so they could say that the killer was among this group, and it wouldn't have any international political implications at all. So that was a good solution. And after Holmér's dismissal, when he resigned were forced to resign. Then he continued to carry out this kind of investigation with a private person, a publisher also. So they were importing equipment and so on from abroad through one of the policemen who we can confront in many cases when it comes to this very conspiracy. Gustav Östling, though, so it was his name, and he had made business with South Africa before, and he was the one who started a private arms company, so supplying arms and equipment to the Palme Group and so on. So Holmér was the biggest customer. And Holmér also used bodyguards from this right extreme group, this baseball gang. So,
in 2015, Robert Harkervy and me discussed with the last chief investigator, Christoph Pettersson.
Yeah.
And he told us in a 3 hours discussion, everything depends on the cooperation of the Swedish Secret Service, Säpo. Did Säpo cooperate with the investigators?
No, not at all. And there was also a review commission that couldn't have access to all the secret documents, and they couldn't interrogate people under oath and so on. So there were big limitations to what they could do. And that was the third commission that should examine this police track. And they were very critical also to this aspect, that the security police didn't cooperate with the Palme Group. So that's very strange that they didn't do that. But we can understand also why.
Finally, Christoph Pettersson named as the murderer the so-called Skandia man, because he worked in the Skandia building as a designer.
That's Stig Engström.
Stig Engström.
That was the final solution of the Palme Group.
Yes, and we have exactly a new lone nut. Is this possible? Could Stig Engström be the perpetrator?
No, and this not long ago, the senior prosecutor in Sweden, he started to follow up this a little bit with this Stig Engström, who was the final solution. He has deceased just in 2002. And then he came to the conclusion that it was not substantial, that he could be acquitted. So that's not longer the official version that it was a lone assassin of this insurance clerk at Skandia.
And we know from 2 persons of the security service of the Skandia building that Stig Engström was inside the building in the moment Palme was shot.
Yeah, that's a bit compromising to him. He is said to have gone out there some minutes before the murder and so on. And he is said to have. He said that he did some measures. He was helping everybody on the crime scene, but no one had seen him there, and so on. And he was the one who might have run after the murderer also. And he heard that there was a radio message that the perpetrator should look like him, and then he was eager to get back to tell the police that it was the wrong suspicion there, and so on. But the official version is that he went out there and he had a gun with him, and then that he killed Palme, and then he ran up the stairs, and then he returned back to the crime scene also. It's very and chatted with the personnel, his colleagues in the reception of Skandia, the guards there. So.
Do you believe this story?
No, not at all. But it can be the case that he had some kind of role in this whole operation. We can't exclude that, because he is lying about many things.
40 years later, the Palme case is closed. Most of all these points are unsolved. The complete case is unsolved. But you are not satisfied with that. You formulated an appeal.
That's right. The senior prosecutor, he didn't decide to reopen the case anyway. But we have a work task. We've been working for the creation of a truth commission about this, with strong mandate to get full access to the military service archives and the security police, and a full mandate to interrogate people under oath, because there are many persons still alive. They're getting older and older now. So time is ripe now to talk with these people who have a lot of things to tell. And even if they were involved in this, in some case, in this exercise or so on, they haven't got the whole picture. They know their little part of it. So that's something they can tell about it.
Are you optimistic to find out more, to find a majority to support this appeal?
Yeah, we have started a collection of signatures. So a website, also Palmemordet 40. And then we have this appeal in several languages, and we're spreading it and getting more and more names to make pressure on the authorities and the parliament just to establish this kind of truth commission. And I ask myself, why not? Why shouldn't we do that? We have the most expensive crime investigation in the world, leading to a complete failure and nothing. So, and then it was closed at a time when artificial intelligence could be used to go through all the documents that could have been scanned. And there are projects going on because they have released a lot of documents, but a lot of them are masked with black, so everything is not open. Not even today. And then, they closed it in spite of the possibilities that artificial intelligence have. So, and tomorrow there will be a manifestation, and all the members of parliament have been given this kind of appeal that we have on our site also. So, with a letter and urging them to take actions here to establish a truth commission about the Palme assassination. So, and I hope you all will sign it if you haven't done that already.
The manifestation had taken place on February 28, 2026. I'm pressing my thumbs for this appeal, for bringing the truth into light. And thank you very much, Henry Söderström.
Thank you.
Das war Henry Söderström, der Sohn des Polizisten, der beim Mord an Olof Palme als erster am Tatort war. Er unterstützt einen Appell, die ganze Wahrheit ans Licht zu bringen und eine Wahrheitskommission einzusetzen. Wir bei Gegen den Strom zeigen Ihnen Positionen und Perspektiven, welche die Propagandamedien verschweigen.